This is not breaking news. This is not a scandal. This is not about one person. This is about something quieter and much more dangerous, because systems don't usually fail by collapsing. They fail by emptying out, by continuing to operate on paper while losing consent in real time. What you're about to hear isn't loud. It doesn't involve shouting or chaos. It involves people standing up and leaving, not as theater, not as protest signs or speeches, but as a refusal to keep participating in a process that no longer feels legitimate. That matters more than outrage, because outrage can be managed, absence cannot. If you're watching this thinking, asterisk, this feels procedural, asterisk, stay with me. Procedures are where power hides. This moment didn't announce itself, it revealed itself. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. What happened next wasn't confusion, it was a signal, and the system heard it. What actually controls a political system is not ideology. It's not even law. It's participation. The assumption always is that people will show up, they will take their seats. They will argue inside the lines. They will legitimize the process simply by being there. That assumption is the load-bearing wall, because power does not come from force in a chamber like this. It comes from routine, from predictability, from the belief that no matter how ugly things get, the machine keeps moving. Personalities are interchangeable, votes can be whipped, rules can be bent, but when participation becomes optional, control weakens fast. What you saw was not rebellion. Rebellion still plays the game. It argues, it votes no. This was something else. This was a withdrawal of consent from the process itself. And systems built on norms don't have a backup plan for that. Because the moment people stop participating, the question is no longer times who's in charge, asterisk. It's whether the system can still command presence at all. And that question doesn't stay contained. It spreads. This didn't start that day. That's the part that makes people uncomfortable. Because the most dangerous changes in a system don't arrive as shocks. They arrive as adjustments. Small ones, reasonable ones, temporary ones that never quite roll back. There was a time when debate wasn't optional, when delay was frustration, not defiance, when reading the material was assumed, not negotiated, before pressure was balanced by process. Now, process is treated as an obstacle to be managed. Deadlines tightened, votes accelerated, transparency labeled inefficient. Nothing broke all at once. That's why it worked. Each step was framed as necessary, urgent, non-negotiable. And over time, the expectation shifted. Show up, trust leadership, vote when told. What changed wasn't the rule book. It was the tolerance for bypassing it. Slow change feels safe. It gives everyone plausible deniability, no alarms, no headlines. Until the moment arrives when staying seated feels more dangerous than standing up. And when that calculation flips, it doesn't flip back easily, because now the system has revealed something it can't take back. Then came the moment that broke the surface. On the schedule, it looked ordinary. A vote, procedural language, framed as urgent, framed as unavoidable. That framing mattered, because urgency is how systems bypass scrutiny without admitting they're doing it. Behind closed doors, lawmakers were told this would move forward fast. No meaningful debate, no amendments, no time to fully review what they were being asked to approve. That sounds technical. It isn't. Inside a body built on deliberation, that is pressure without protection. This wasn't about disagreement over policy. It was about being ordered to legitimize something blind. You could feel the shift in the room. Not confusion, recognition, notes passed, phones buzzed, eyes met. Staying seated would mean accepting the new normal. Walking out would mean crossing a line no one was supposed to cross. And then it happened. Not loudly, not dramatically. Chairs moved back, papers were gathered, senators stood, and one by one, they left. The chamber didn't erupt. It hollowed out. And in that silence, The system flinched. Here's the part that rarely gets said out loud. The system still functions because the cost of compliance is usually lower than the cost of resistance. If you stay seated, you absorb reputational damage quietly. If you vote yes, responsibility diffuses. If something goes wrong, blame spreads thin. That's how pressure works. It doesn't need agreement. It just needs people to keep showing up. Leadership benefits from speed, from opacity, from momentum that outruns scrutiny. The damage doesn't land on them first. It lands on the people forced to defend decisions they didn't shape. That's the trade. Those at the top gain control. Those below absorb the risk, but that equation only holds if everyone believes resistance will be punished more severely than compliance. The walkout broke that math because in that moment, the cost of staying became visible and the cost of leaving became shared. No speeches, no names, just bodies refusing to legitimize the process by occupying it. That's what made it contagious. Once a few stood, the calculation changed for everyone else. And when calculations change inside a closed system, the system doesn't adapt gracefully. It strains. The reaction was immediate. Phones, whispers, staff moving fast, then faster. Leadership tried to intervene. Too late. The floor sat half empty. Cameras lingered. Seconds stretched. In Washington, delay is exposure. Every unanswered question multiplied. Was this planned? Who started it? Would they come back? No clear answers. And that was the problem. Control depends on coordination. Coordination depends on warning. There was none. What made this moment dangerous wasn't defiance. It was independence. People acted without clearance, without permission, without a narrative. That's when systems panic, because there's nothing to negotiate with. No speech to counter, no motion to table, just absence. Outside the chamber, speculation filled the vacuum. Inside leadership offices, tempers flared. Some saw betrayal. Others saw relief. The longer it dragged on, the harder it became to call it minor. Every empty seat was a statement. And the system understood something it didn't want to admit. This wasn't a delay. It was a signal. And signals don't wait for permission. Here's where this reaches you. Because this isn't just about a chamber or a vote. It's about what happens when process stops protecting the people inside it. When decisions move too fast, someone always absorbs the impact later. And that someone is rarely the person giving the order. It's you watching institutions you're supposed to trust feel thinner, less stable, more performative. You feel it when outcomes seem predetermined, when participation feels symbolic, when showing up no longer feels like influence. That erosion doesn't announce itself. It shows up as fatigue, as disengagement, as the sense that the system keeps moving, whether or not you're part of it. The walkout mattered because it mirrored that feeling, people choosing absence over hollow participation. If you've ever wondered whether disengagement is a form of power, this was an answer. Not a solution. A warning. If this kind of moment unsettles you, don't look away. Stay with it. Share it, because systems don't reverse course unless attention forces them to. And what comes next makes this moment look small. What happened didn't stay contained, because systems like this are watched closely by other institutions built on the same fragile assumptions: participation, discipline, predictability. When one chamber shows that presence is optional, others take notes. Not publicly, quietly. Legislatures elsewhere operate on similar norms. So do courts. So do alliance. So do markets that depend on political stability without asking too many questions. The signal wasn't ideological. It was structural. If lawmakers can withdraw instead of comply, then authority becomes conditional. That uncertainty ripples outward. Partners hesitate. Opponents probe. Internal actors begin testing boundaries they once avoided. Not because they want chaos, because they're trying to locate where power actually lives now. And that's the danger. When power becomes unclear, decisions slow. Commitments weaken, coordination frays. This wasn't a local disturbance. It was a stress fracture. And fractures don't stay where they start. They spread under pressure. The question now isn't whether this happens again. It's where and under what circumstances. From here, the system has three paths. None of them are clean. The first is adjustment, quiet recalibration, more consultation, slower movement, an attempt to pull participation back into the room by restoring the sense that presence still matters. This path looks calm on the surface. It requires restraint and patience the system has not shown much of lately. The second is erosion. No dramatic break, just repetition. More moments like this, each one slightly easier than the last. Walkouts become tools. Absence becomes leverage. Authority doesn't vanish, it thins. Decision by decision. Then there is rupture. That's when withdrawal stops being exceptional. When participation itself becomes a bargaining chip. When institutions discover too late that they cannot compel presence without force and were never designed to try. None of these paths announce themselves in advance. They overlap. They blur. And right now, the system is standing at the point where all three are still possible. Which one wins depends on what happens next. Not tomorrow. Not years from now. Next time. This doesn't end with a verdict. It ends with a question the system is trying not to ask out loud. What happens when participation can no longer be assumed? Because rules don't enforce themselves. Norms don't survive on history. And authority doesn't exist without consent that is actively renewed. What you saw was not collapse. It was hesitation, and hesitation inside a system built on momentum is dangerous. There will be statements. There will be explanations. There will be efforts to frame this as isolated, procedural, resolved. Pay attention to what doesn't happen. Watch whether participation feels voluntary again. Watch whether absence becomes easier. Watch who starts preparing for the next moment instead of repairing this one. This is not about personalities. It never was. It's about whether institutions can still command presence without coercion. And that question is now open. If you want to understand where this leads, not in theory, but in practice, stay close. Subscribe, follow the trail, because the next time this happens, it won't feel novel. It will feel normal. And that's when systems don't bend. They break.